For those of you that are new to the webinar, thank you for attending. And for those that have attended our previous webinars, thank you for coming back. I'm John Rosine, a practice manager at SVA Consulting, and I'm joined by my colleagues, Logan, Kaylee, and Tanya, who will be going through the functionality for approval and assignment maps. So Logan and Kaylee will be handling the demonstration component today, and Tanya is going to be helping to facilitate any questions from the audience. So as we go through this presentation, and if you have any questions on the content that we're covering, please feel free to drop those in the chat. Tanya will help surface those during the presentation. And if they're not directly related to the topic we're covering, we'll actually have a Q&A session towards the end of the webinar today to address those. So please feel free to drop those directly in the Zoom chat here as we proceed. All right. So we're going to start off with a quick agenda, quick overview of the topics that we'll be discussing as it relates to approval and assignment maps. So as we get started, we want to explore the workflow functionality around these components within Acumatica. Specifically, we want to start with some of the benefits that we can expect once we have these enabled. As we go through the presentation here, we will also be doing a high-level overview of some of the key components that feed into that functionality, some things to be aware of as we proceed into the demonstration. So as Logan forwards us here to 3 and 4 on the agenda, you're going to see 2 areas of the approval map that we really want to focus on. And one message that we will continue to share throughout this is the functionality for assignment maps is very comparable, but the demonstration will be largely focused around the approval side. We want to focus on the creation and then ultimately the action against those approval maps. So seeing once we've developed certain maps, certain workflows in the system, the outcomes from those and tie those back. So we understand the connections here between what we've set up and ultimately what we're executing on. As we wrap up the demonstration in Acumatica, we'll come back for that Q&A session, as I had previously mentioned, and then some next steps, our upcoming webinar and some additional sources for the attendees here to review, and also a link back to our webinar channel on YouTube where we have our previous recordings covering the most recent features of Acumatica and specific functionality related to CRM and core functions within the system. That might be on the order management and distribution side, as well as project accounting. And we're going to continue to build out content there. All right. As we get into the key benefits of assignment and approval maps, a few areas that we want to highlight and keep as priorities as we think through how we could apply this to our organization. So first and foremost, it maintains compliance and consistency. What we'll see is we can develop logical workflows that are set for certain parameters within the business. So say, for instance, we're in a regulated environment where we need to have a signature authority matrix. That is, anything flowing through maybe our AP process, our purchase order process, needs to be approved at certain thresholds. The system will allow us to enforce that and ensure that as documents, as transactions flow through the system, we are receiving the appropriate approval throughout that process. Additionally, if we focus on the transparency side of it, we're able to better manage certain aspects of our organization. Say, for instance, within that purchase order and AP bill scenario, we want to control spend. Well, how do we do that? We put in steps to allow us to see that spend before we actually spend the dollars, right? So in the case of a procurement cycle, we want to get ahead of the purchases that are being produced within our organization, authorize those before we actually receive the invoicing from it. The same can be said within perhaps a project environment where we have change orders or change requests that are going to influence the budget of any given project. We want to get ahead of those before we actually absorb those within the project. So we might put an approval map in that process. As long as we have the formality of, say, a change order in that context, why not put an approval map on that so that we can get the right eyes on it before it hits or affects our projects. Also here, reducing errors and relieving bottlenecks within the process. As Logan will demonstrate, we can bring in multiple individuals, multiple work groups within any given process here to allow the right individuals to approve and see documents as they flow through the system. Not everybody needs to see everything all the time. And we need to make sure that we're surfacing the right documents, the right transactions, the right activity within our business at the right times. And so this will help with that, to alleviate some of that bottleneck within an organization, to only surface, to prioritize when it's needed. So we'll see how that factors into the demonstration here as well. And then lastly, focusing on increasing our productivity. As we go through this process, a lot of times what we hear in the current state is we have manual processes to facilitate this. Maybe it's through email, maybe it's through Excel documents, maybe it's a stamp of approval on the desk, a physical paper. What this will allow is for our processes to be tracked within the system. So we have the electronic stamp on it. We know where it resides within the system, so that our team can continue to work within the system, to be productive, and not have those hangups within our processes or those bottlenecks that might reduce somebody's ability to get their job completed. So really focusing on the enhancements around productivity through system visibility. How can we see the approvals in their current state? How do we see where things are at within the process? And backing up so that, again, we're not getting bottlenecked through manual processes. As we think through the components that feed this, a few areas that Logan will go deeper into as we get into the demonstration itself. But we'll see that there's a variety of entities for which we can apply an approval or an assignment map against. And by entities, I mean specifically the documents. So that might be on the change orders, perhaps going into a project, maybe AP bills, purchase orders that precede those AP bills. We have a number of areas within Acumatica where we can assign these logical workflows based off of our priorities, the higher risk areas. We also have certain steps and rules that we can configure to allow for a hierarchy within any given workflow. So what you'll see is a pretty substantial level of flexibility in how we set up that structure. Maybe we have different tiers based off of different thresholds, dollars, maybe different departments, maybe different entities. We can configure that so we can get the flexibility we need and direct the workflow as we need it. We'll also see a set of conditions. So as we define those steps and those rules, what specifically are we looking at? Is it anything in excess of $1,000, in excess of $1,500? Do we need to have different variables within those conditions? Again, there is a lot of flexibility that comes with the configuration parameters within the approval and assignment maps. Sometimes that can be overwhelming, and we're always here to help the SVA team to work through specifically what needs to exist in the system. And then lastly, the rule actions. So really, this is the outcome. Once we have the entities, the steps, the hierarchy configured, I want to see the actual outcome of that. So in this case, it might be an individual providing an approval or a work group providing an approval. How do we have reassignments for people that are maybe out of the office? How do we handle those situations? Those are specifically defined within what we refer to as our rule actions. So that's really the outcome of our configuration. And so these are a few areas that Logan will get deeper into, but wanted to preface the conversation with this so we're aware of those as we jump in. Logan, Kaylee, any context to add to that? Anything that I missed?
No, I think we'll get deeper into each of those areas with this demonstration, kind of just to illustrate it live, maybe understand it a little bit better within the context of Acumatica.
All right. So I think with that then, Logan, I believe our next slide is going to take us to our demo slide.
Yep, I'll go ahead
transition
and
us into Acumatica.
Share out my screen then here. Thanks, John. So to start, I wanted to kind of go into the basis of the approval or assignment workflow of Acumatica. So that'll be the assignment or approval map located within the configuration module. With that, I'll go ahead and open up the assignment approval map screen. And to start, we're not going to go too in-depth into the assignment maps, as John mentioned previously, but I'll just show out a standard assignment map that kind of shows, one, how similar it is to the approval maps, which we will be going more into depth on, and then some of the capabilities here. So First, we'll see the entity type. So some common entities that we would set up an assignment map in the system for are opportunities, contacts, leads, and at a high level, what the assignment map does, it is assigns ownership to an individual employee within the system for maintaining that entity. So for example, you create a new opportunity. We have our sales territory ID. Went more into depth in this on the 23R2 webinar if you want to take a look at that. But any new opportunity that has that East sales territory ID, so any Eastern region state is created in the system, it'll automatically assign that to whatever employee we have set on the rule action. So in this case, it would assign that out to Alex Sanchez, and that would happen automatically for any new opportunities within the system. We also have the ability to retroactively use this assignment map on existing opportunities or contacts or leads in the system. And again, I won't go too deep into this, but if I just show the opportunities module here, we'll see underneath the processes, we have that mass assign opportunities function here. With that, we can go ahead and then run a process that will update it with all of our sales territory IDs, as I just showed, and then the appropriate owner in this case for that opportunity. Just show again, I mentioned the leads and contacts, so that's located within the marketing module, but same process, just a mass process to retroactively assign things like leads and contacts within Acumatica. All right. Perfect. With that, I'll back out of here and just create a new approval map. So to show the entities that we have within the system, as John mentioned, this is pretty open throughout the site. But if I open up that entity type list, we'll see some common ones. And actually today I'll be going through a bills and adjustments approval process. We have things like cash purchases, cash transactions, checks, time cards, all that fun stuff. Feel free to come into the approval maps and kind of take a look at all the different entities. It is quite a long list. What I really wanted to just make clear here is that the process of setting up these approval maps is pretty uniform across entities. So you see within the preferences, we have to activate them, but we have the same kind of functions for conditions and rule actions that I'll walk through here across modules in Acumatica. All right. And here we are. So I set up this AP approval map in preparation for this demonstration. So I'll go ahead and open that up. One, we'll see that I selected the entity type of bills and adjustments, which is what I'm going to be walking through here momentarily. And another thing I wanted to kind of point you to is the tiered structure that we have set up on the left-hand side. So we have first the departmental approval and then the accounting approval. It will follow kind of the order of those steps and rules that you see. So first it's going to look for a departmental approval before then moving on to the accounting approval. If I look at the step level, so we have a few different options for what we want it to do if the approver is not found. So I'll open this up. And so if you wanted to reject the document, so we don't want anything to bypass the departmental approval, we can have it do so. We could also have it approve a document if it doesn't find an approver. I can't say I see that one too often. We also have the ability to set it to go to next step. So in this case, if we had a bill that didn't meet one of the departmental approvals, it could then go into our catch-all step, and this is specific to the one I have set up here. We have an accounting catch-all step that is any document that's created within the AP module is going to go through this accounting approval.
So we have a few options there, right, Logan? We can have something that does, like in this context, accounting approval, does catch those that might not meet our departmental approval, or it can serve as a secondary approval after the department. However, that's piece on what happens if no approver is found can very much act as a control procedure. So if we don't meet our conditions, rejecting the document might be exactly what we want. As Logan said, typically we don't automatically approve the document. However, this can be configured based off of what those requirements are from a control perspective. So based off of the complexity, thinking through all the different thresholds, the different hierarchies that might exist, the different tiers, might be very reasonable to simply reject that document if we don't meet any of those conditions. So we have visibility into that and we can fix it.
Taking a further look into here into our rules within the system. So as you can see, I'll click into one of our lines so we can have multiple different departmental approvals. So it can go through a different assigned approver or work group of approvals, depending upon what department in this case it's being routed to. So just to kind of show what I've already set up here, so we can say that for the AP document branch, that is equal to Canada. And just some background to my environments, I kind of have all these different companies and branches set up. So if you are dividing out that work by a different company or branch, we can have that parameter set. So based on, in this case, within the financial tab of an AP bill, it's going to route specifically to the appropriate approver for that entity. We also have the operator here on the right-hand side. So if we want it to be an and condition, so in this case, anything over 1,000 and equal to Canada is the conditions that it needs to meet in order to go through this approval step. We could also have an or, so if there's a number of different or conditions that would make this approval necessary, we can set it up that way as well. Within our rule actions, here's where we're going to set who actually approves the document and then a few other preferences as well. So one individual employee is relatively straightforward. So in this case, my user for demonstration purposes is the assigned approver. That is the only individual by default that is able to approve AP bills in this case, or if there's another entity in the system, that is one single employee. The alternative is a work group, and this is set on the company tree screen within Acumatica, but that would mean a group of individuals can approve the documents. Within that, you can also set a primary approver. So if there's one individual that would typically be approving from a work group, we can set that ownership, but anyone within that work group could approve that document. Another preference here is the ability to allow the reassignment of approvals. So this common use case would be if you're out of the office for a week and you're one single approver, we obviously can't stop your AP workflow. We'd want to reroute that to someone else. So with that checkbox selected, approvals for this document type can be rerouted to another individual in the system. I'll go through what that configuration looks like, but without that checkbox selected, even if you are delegating out your approvals for a period of time, these specific bills will not be rerouted. Just one thing to keep in mind. The decision wait time is the expected response time for an approval. So if we say, in this case, we have pretty short leash here, but 2 hours, we expect a response on that approval. This can feed into things like notifications if we're going past our decision wait time, and also a color indicator within the approvals queue, which I'll show. Anything in red is considered overdue. Anything within that decision wait time is in a standard black text, just to show you it has not met that decision wait time threshold. And then if I take a look, so we have two different departmental approvals. So the second one here is following basically the same parameters, just demonstrating the different departments. So we can have a different approver for, in this case, Western Mexico, going through the same parameters. And then once we get that departmental approval, in our case, we'll go into the accounting approval, which we've mentioned. And here we have just a catch-all parameter of greater than or equal to 0, going to an actual work group rather than an individual employee. So here we'll see we have the accounting work group set, and then the primary approver within that work group is Jane Doe. And that'll appear in her approvals queue in this case, which we'll see within that approvals queue is a little bit separate from the work group approvals. To further reiterate now kind of what I mentioned here, I'll go ahead and create another departmental approval just so you can see what that looks like. So with that, I'll hit add rule. And then we can give this a name. So I think in my environment, it's something like Western USA. And here we can add in our conditions. So here shows kind of the flexibility we have. And even within the entity of the bills and adjustment, there are a ton of different things you can set this approval to be based off of. So maybe the employee creating it, the AP document, which I'll show here, but if anything on the purchase order or vendor specifically needs to be approved, we can set it that way. So I'll go ahead and select the AP document. And then within that, there are fields. So we'll see things like amount, branch. You can also set the vendor approval from the actual individual AP document as well. In this case, I'll go ahead and find that branch, because that's what we're kind of routing this approval from. And then I'll show just the different conditions we have. So something like amount, you could say is greater than or equal to, is less than, or does not contain. It's pretty wide open in the system how we can set up these parameters. I'll then update that value, Western USA, and then we'll have that and operator. So meaning we need it to be one, this branch, and also the amount, not either of the two. And I'll select that here.
And as Logan's populating the amount here, one thing to consider in that field drop down as well, because we do get these questions. If you have any user-defined field, any customized fields in that For instance, within your AP document, you'd be able to call to that attribute specifically to help define your approval routings as well. So I think actually, Logan, that one that's indicated as AMCT, yeah, that colors is actually a user-defined field that you have within your demo environment that we could use as a point of reference for an approval workflow.
And then the second step of this, once we have those conditions set up again, would be those rule actions. So here we can select either an employee or a work group. So within that work group, we'll see, we will make it the accounting. We'll just select one of these random ones. So if we say the CEO work group is responsible, and then that employee field will automatically populate based on who was assigned as the owner. That's a good segue into the company trees where these work groups are actually set up. So I'll go ahead and save my change to the system, and then come back into the configuration module. And I'll open the screen up. And so as we had that accounting work group set up, I'll just use this as an example. So we'll see we have 3 different individuals that, in the case of approval maps, would be able to approve a document. That primary owner field is simply that checkbox here. It's relatively easy to update these work groups. All we'd have to do is add in a row and then select one of our users in the system. Let's go ahead and select someone random. And now Clark, in this case, would be able to approve documents assigned to the accounting work group moving forward. Anything you'd add there on the company tree, John or Kaylee?
I think what's really important in terms of thinking through the company tree is really not trying to tailor this specifically to an approval map, but setting up your organizational structure in here and for us to reference that through the approval map in the right ways. But this particular work group scenario, I know we are referring to in the context of an approval map. This comes into other areas as well when we think about the ability to handle time entry and expense entry for employees that might exist underneath you in this hierarchy on the company tree. So there's other extended functionality. It becomes more important to set it up based off of your organizational requirements, less a specific approval map.
All right. And then the final component of setting up an approval, making sure it's active and AP bills will actually go through the approval process, is the preferences screen. And so this is uniform across modules. So if we were in AR setting up an invoice approval, for example, you go into the accounts receivable preferences. This is not specific to AP bills. It would be just the relevant module in the preferences screen. But I'll go ahead and populate that. And at the top, we'll see this approval tab right in the middle. And from here, what is nice, specifically for the AP documents in this case, is you can set that AP approval map not only for bills, but if you want credit adjustments or debit adjustments to go through that same approval process, we don't need to create a new approval map necessarily. Obviously, we could, but if we wanted to add this to the debit adjustments, all we need to do is add in a row, select the document type here, and then select the appropriate approval map. So I'll go ahead and select that AP approval we have set up today, and then make sure we commit it to the system by selecting save. Once this is in place, we have all of these active. We have the approval map active in the actual assignment and approval map screen. We should now see AP bills go through the approval process that we have configured. To demonstrate that, I'll go ahead and open up the payables module and create a new bill. All right, and we'll just create a new bill here and select our vendor. Many of you will probably be familiar with setting up AP bills. I'll try to go through this quickly as I can, just making sure we're meeting the conditions that we have set for our approval. So as we have it set to 1,000, we want to make sure we have that amount greater than 1,000. And then also, as I mentioned, the financial tab. This one is based off of the branch. So I want to make sure it's going to one of our branches that we have that approval map configured for. And I'll enter an invoice number here and then hit save. So this is currently in an on hold status. As you can see, this is not pending approval. The actual trigger for going into the approval process is removing the document from hold. So if I pull this off of the hold, we'll see it goes into the pending approval status. And one important note I like to make, we want to make sure we save it to actually commit it to the approval. If we don't save it, it's not going to send it through. It'll still be in that on hold state. Within the approvals tab, we'll see who this approval is routed to. So in this case, I have this assigned to myself. We'll see that as one individual user. The approved by ID and work group can become more important when you do have that work group. So if you do want to see who actually approved the document, even though it is assigned to an entire work group of people, it will track one, the approval dates, but also who approved the document. As I am one of the assigned approvers, or the only assigned approver in this case, I can actually approve it from this screen. So see the option to approve or reject the document. I'll go ahead and select approve. And we'll then see, as we have that tiered approach set for accounting, we'll see we have the one approval. It's still in a pending approval status though, because we need that second step of the approval. Kaylee, I believe I have you assigned to Jane Doe, if you wouldn't mind kind of approving this, just so we can see this go into the balanced state in Acumatica.
Yep, just approved that document.
All right, so I'll go ahead and refresh this here. And this page. All right. I know I made a few in there. Let's see. All right, so
There we go. All right.
Now we've caught both of those approvals. And as I mentioned, you can see Jane Doe approved it. She was the primary approver, but if anyone within that accounting work group approved it, that would be tracked here on that approved by field. Now, if I refresh this one more time, we'll see it goes into a balanced state. Here you could release the bill and process it as normal. From this point on, this is just going to be a standard bill in the system. Just want to reiterate, the triggers are one, pulling it off of hold. Once we receive all of those approvals, it'll then go into just a balanced state prepared to be released. So that is how you approve one document. Maybe a better tool of kind of summarizing all of your approvals is going to be the approvals queue within the system. So that'll be located within the time and expenses module. And this is specific to the user that's logged in. So in my case, this is Diego Santana's approvals queue. And I'll go ahead and open that up. All right. Here we're going to see all of my approvals. So all of these were over the decision wait time that I had set. So they appeared in that red text color. If they weren't over our decision wait time, they would be in standard black text that signifies to you that these are overdue on the approval when they are red. We'll also see the My Work Groups approvals. And that'd just be anything where I am assigned the approval through a work group I'm in. I'm not necessarily the primary approver for that document. And then we also have a reassigned queue. This is for, again, if I'm out of the office and delegate my approvals to someone else, they would then appear in that reassigned queue. And then we have a list of all of our approvals here. It's just a summation of everything. So your own approvals, work group approvals, and anything that's been reassigned would show up in the all records queue. These are hyperlinked into the different modules. So as you can see, we have maybe a change order, an invoice, a journal transaction, expense, a claim. This will show everything in the system that we were assigned to be an approver for. This is not specific to the AP bills, which makes this queue nice to have as just a quick summary of everything that is assigned to us. All of these are linked back into the actual document. So if I just double click into the reference number here, for example, we'll then be brought into this specific bill. And let's say in this case, I know John created this. I need to reject this document. I can actually come in here, hit that reject. It will then go into a rejected state. So you reviewed this, it didn't meet your standards. We couldn't go through and release the document. Whenever someone else comes into the system, they'll see this is in a rejected state. And the only option underneath the processing is going to be to put this back on hold. So now if I put this back on hold, we're back in step one. We can go ahead and change anything here. So let's say this was coded to the correct or incorrect account. I can update that to the correct one. And then it's going to be the same process. So let's see. Need a project in here. The demo sites are always fun. Make it easy. Let's see.
I think we just put a non-project code in there.
Yep. All right. And again, this is on hold. It had been rejected. If I remove that from hold, it's going to go back through that approval process. So it was rejected, and now it's pending a new approval based on the changes that were made. If I go back into my approvals queue, all right, So we'll see a few different documents. We can also, if we go ahead and reviewed a few different documents at once, we didn't approve them within the individual screen. We actually wanted to approve them from this queue. We have the ability to do so. So if I come in and just select a few and go ahead and hit approve, these have now all been approved in the system. You don't necessarily have to go into the individual documents. I always recommend it to make sure you're actually reviewing the documents. I guess that's up to you. But once you've completed that review, you can approve multiple documents from this queue directly. Another component that I did want to touch on was the reassignment of the approvals. So on an individual basis, just in context of what we've set up here is we have the ability to reassign set on the actual approval map. So I'll just show that once more real quick. So on here, we have the allow reassignment of approvals checkbox selected. The second component of that is going to be the individual user or the employee assigned the approval going into their profile. So you simply select your name and then hit my profile. We have the delegates tab where this is going to be set. So we're going to say, what are we delegating out? So we have the ability to delegate out approvals and then also expense receipts. We're not going to talk through today, but you can through the same kind of process, delegate out expense receipts and claims. Relatively straightforward from there. We'll say one, who are we delegating these out to? So I can select any of the individuals in the system, whoever I want to delegate this out to. I'll go ahead and select that and then set the start on and expires on date. So this is the range of days in the system where your approvals are going to be delegated out to, in this case, David Chubb. And it's not going to like that I did that in the past. So we'll update our days and then set that range. I'll then save. And so now we have this delegation active for our date range, so around 12/13. So if I came back into the payables module and let's select one of our bills just to show what this looks like. I'll go ahead and just recommit this through the approval process. I'll put this back on hold and then remove it from hold. Within our approvals tab, we'll see this is now assigned to David Chubb. I didn't change anything on the actual conditions of the approval map. This automatically just reassigned that out based on the my profile designation and delegation to David for my approvals. Having said that, so David would see this as a standard approval in his own approvals queue. He can approve it. If for whatever reason I want to come back into the system and approve my documents, I'm supposed to be out of the office, but I really need to have a high priority document I need to approve, I can go into my approvals queue. So I'll reopen that screen. And we'll see that within the reassigned queue, we have that AP bill. I can then come into here. So if I want to come in, select that reference number and hit approve. We'll see that though it was assigned to David for this period of time, I actually came back in and approved it. So even though you delegate it out, you're still able to approve these documents during that date range. With this process, we also have the ability to set up notifications in the system to make sure everyone's aware of what approvals are assigned to them, kind of send a daily queue to individuals, and we're able to facilitate that through our email templates in the system. So I'll go ahead and open up the email templates here underneath the system management. And here we go. And so we're pretty flexible again with the email templates we don't want to send out for notification purposes with approvals. We can set who it's going to. If we want to have one, for example, the approval owner be notified. You can also CC someone else that needs to be in the loop on potential approvals. We can set the system email this is coming from, and then we can utilize dynamic text fields to update this information. So if we want to include things like invoice number on that email notification that goes out, the total of the documents in our email, and then maybe a quick link back into Acumatica for review would be a common one. And if you'd have a high volume of approvals, maybe these emails get annoying, we can set maybe a 5 o'clock at the end of the day, a summary of your approvals, including as much or as little information as you'd like. Maybe there are just approvals in your queue or breaking it down, number of documents, total amount, and things along those lines.
I'd say, Logan, that's usually the the typical method, right, to have perhaps an end of day notification that goes out, or maybe early morning, so it's top of the inbox. Because if we trigger that on the individual record, what you notice in the AP bill, and this is true for any document, that removal of hold triggers the approval, but it also is the same function that allows an individual to edit a document. So if anybody's toggling between on hold and not on hold, that trigger will be met every time. So usually we take the approach of having a centralized queue for those approvals and distribute based off of that. So people aren't getting kind of unnecessary emails or notifications when somebody is simply editing a document in that process.
With that, so this is a demo environment. I didn't actually send out any emails, but I did have a business event set up that was automatically sending out emails from the system to the assigned approver's email. And this will queue up in our all emails queue. So even though they actually didn't send out to Outlook or your email inbox, we can actually track that in the system through our time and expenses module. So I'll demonstrate what that email template would generate from the system. And I'll go ahead and open this top one. And so here you can see it's sent out to the assigned approver. So I had Kaylee set up as that Jane Doe. It notified her of this approval coming from our system email. And then in the subject line, we had something like the AP invoice number is awaiting your approval. And then in the body of the paragraph, again, we could update this to be whatever is most helpful for your team. You can say this invoice and this amount is waiting for your approval, and then link them back into the system. And I'll demonstrate what that link looks like. So if you come in here and just select that and go to the link, will be brought directly into our approvals queue in the system. I think that is primarily all the content I wanted to cover. Kaylee or John, anything that I missed in this process we'd like to review further?
One thing that
question. Oops, sorry. We do have one question. We have a customer that was set up for approvals for payments, but they were told that an email would be sent for each payment versus a summary. So they'd like for you to emphasize again how you can set it up for a once per day notification.
for a once per day notification, so summarizing those.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Logan, I think, yeah. Logan,
Yeah,
if you want to show how we currently queue those up, because that's all navigated through a business event. And we're definitely able to work through the specifics for the client here, Tanya, in terms of what that might look like in their environment. Logan should be able to provide at least a quick overview of how that looks.
Yeah, so I won't get too into the details here, but how this is handled is on the generic inquiry. There's a few parameters we can set to group the approvals. Also on the business event itself, we can say instead of triggering it by a record change, which I have set up currently. So this would be the method of every new approval that's coming in is triggering an email. Instead of that, we can actually group the records. So we can group the records and then trigger it by a schedule, and that schedule would link into the end of the day. And that's how we would handle that. And we can certainly help with that process as needed.
Yeah, so that might just take some manipulation on the business event, as Logan has shown here. And it'd probably also be worthwhile to see any generic inquiry if that's what's feeding it, versus perhaps a primary list screen as well. So maybe the default Acumatica queue. So those things would be contemplated in setting that up. Tanya, any additional questions in the queue at this point?
Not right now.
One thing that I just wanted to bring up real quick, Logan, if you navigate back into one of your AP bills that's pending approval, just touching on the one-off reassignment capabilities as well under the ellipses. So if you are in the approval side, so we walk through the reassignment process right as you're out of the office at automatic reassignment. But that was also extended here on the approval side. So if you select that reassign, we can do a one-off. We don't have to push this through the system right now, but this is an option that's available. Perhaps there's an AP bill that has a unique exception. I want a department had to approve this specific one. They don't always approve it. You can work through that one-off assignment. This capability around reassignment was introduced. Logan, correct me if I'm wrong, that was 23R1. So this might not be available depending on the current version that you're on. But there was some areas that we tried to work around this with work groups. But this reassignment process has been redeveloped, again, for the example that Logan provided, or in that mass reassignment and the one-off reassignment as well. Excellent. If there's no additional questions, Logan, I think we can pop back into the presentation to close us out today.
All right.
All right, so a few resources here. If you have any questions from our webinar today, or if you're reviewing our previous webinars, feel free to drop us an email. So we have listed here our contact at sva.com. So if you have any information perhaps for Tanya, she would be able to help on certain pricing if it relates to that. I mean, we also have our tech support as well. In addition, you can always go directly to our website, consulting.sva.com. I mean, we have a support queue there as well. Upcoming in February, we will have an additional webinar. We are going to be moving into a monthly cadence from that point forward as we carry over into the new year. So expect some more details to be shared on that webinar for February and the ones that'll be following. And for those of you that are new and haven't been able to attend our previous webinars, we do have just a link here for YouTube under the SVA Consulting Acumatica webinars. That's where these are all consolidated. We also do like to point out that Acumatica community site as well. It's a helpful space to jump into, to review ideas that are out there, to post any issues, to see if other individuals within the community are reporting similar issues, and stay up to date on any new release information as well. So always recommend checking out the Acumatica community if you haven't done that. And that's linked there in the Explore side. All right. As we wrap up, Tanya, anything else coming through the queue here?
No.
All right. All right. I think if we're not receiving any more questions, thank you everybody for the time today. We really appreciate the attendance, and we look forward to the February webinar.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.